Again, welcome, guys. Really excited to have you in tonight. I feel like I know I was just talking to Nick and Adam, talking about tonight's topic, and it's a really, to me, important one. But yeah, fantastic. But we'll get straight into it. But what we're going to be discussing is the junior tennis pathways, and super excited to have Adam Feeney, the former professional, my former doubles partner, our head of coach development at Voyager, and really doing a great job in developing a lot of our young up and coming talent. So, Adam, welcome tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely, and of course, and Nick Evans. Nick's our head tennis professional at our Tarman Tennis Club, who to me is one of the most passionate and knowledgeable people. That's again we've seen in such a short space of time that the culture that he's created at the club, again with how dedicated he is, I just thought it was such a great opportunity to talk to Nick as well as get some people that might not have necessarily met Nick before to join. So, Nick, welcome.
Thank you, Luke. Very exciting to be here.
Yeah, and no, definitely. And again, for those who don't know, my name's Luke Bourgeois. I'm our director of performance at Voyager, and again, really excited for tonight. But just before we get into it, just a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, we are recording. I know this is one of our most frequently sort of discussed topics, so we will be recording it. It is aimed to be interactive, so if you do have any questions, please put them in the sort of chat box. If we can get them sort of answer them on time, but we will dedicate time at the end of the sort of the information session to go through some of those questions. But yeah, please keep your microphones on mute at this point. But I guess again, guys, really talking about the purpose of tonight. Like for me, it's just such a great topic because we've started to do really well nationally. And it's one of the things. I'm now down in Canberra at J100 at the ITF. We've had 5 players down here competing that are part of our full-time program. And we're seeing how we've sort of been able to dominate on a national level. And I sort of, sorry to take sort of the credit here, I think a lot of it's due to our full-time program. And a big part of that's been the education. I know we've had 39 participants at national level, and we're seeing them now transition to playing internationally. And that's again, really great to see how some of our kids are transitioning, playing orange ball, Eddie Herr, being on Australian tours. Even a lot of our college recruits are sort of starting to come full circle. Adam, one of the guys that you work with, Michael, actually bumped into his dad on the weekend. He's about to graduate from Harvard University. So it's yeah, it's been really, really cool. And I think one of the linchpins to it's just been that piece, that education piece. And that's where we've seen a huge amount of improvement with around training volumes, match count, and those sort of areas. But I think, again, to be honest, I think we're scratching the surface compared to internationally what's happening out there. And again, Adam, I know for you as well, talking about obviously a better understanding of what's required. We've seen a lot more of the sort of world's best traits from character and dedication that we're seeing. But yeah, again, it's exciting. So just
Yeah, looking forward to obviously a good conversation around this and hopefully getting some questions answered for a lot of people as well. So it's a well-known topic, tournaments that everyone goes through, and there's different stages of it. So hopefully we can cover off a lot of those myths to it. And I guess the Australian circuit has sort of changed recently too. So trying to make sure that's a bit more clear for everyone.
yeah, and again, so what we're going to plan to cover tonight is really that idea of the education piece, what we've seen, and I think we've Nick, you talk about it a lot, where there's so much confusion and no real understandings on pathways and how that can really affect the decisions that parents make. But yeah, I think what we aim to do is just increase the chance of success. Because I think one of the big things that I hear all the time is one of the big sources of information is actually either other parents or Google. Um, and again, what we really want to make sure that the goals that we hear about aren't necessarily aligning with the work that we're seeing put into it. And that's really what we want to look for is, again, how we can see more people achieve their best, travel down that national pathway, play the nationals and travel further down the pathway, whether it's internationally or whether it's on the college. But again, the vision here for me is really clear. It's how we can have more people performing on an international level. And I think that's where, for me, probably the best place to start is we'll look at some of the ranking benchmarks with pros, the ranking benchmarks with juniors, and that junior pathway, how it works, as well as schedules of see what players and how they can achieve it. Um, so I think a key thing for me here is really around that success leaves clues, and probably what we're going to look to do here is start with the end in mind, and just to share some insights. Tennis Australia have a goal of 30 top 100 players by 2032. So by the Olympics, they want 30, so 15 men and 15 women in that area. And that's where they've spent a lot more time with, I guess, coaches trying to do some education piece, as well as working with young kids, like really get them through. Because what they've been able to do is really track and understand what players do to achieve that success. And that's where, again, I think even there's a bit of discussion pre-conversation here on what playing professionally is. I mean, for me, just for the reality there, it's where you actually earn enough money to pay for your expenses. That's what I see. I see a lot of people that have a very, very expensive hobby. And typically that's around, sort of for the men, it's about top 150 ATP. For the women, it's about top 120, where you can actually earn enough money to pay your way. And again, I don't wish to scare people away, but that's basically about 5 to 10 jobs globally per year that become available. That's that idea of that sort of top 100 success. And what Tennis Australia has done is they've basically benchmarked through rankings to create a formula to see what success looks like. And to sort of kick it off, I think, as you can see there from the ATP side of things, one of the key benchmarks is that you have an ATP ranking by your 16th or 17th birth year. So, Adam, I know I actually know who you beat to get your first ATP point.
Yeah, he's really good. He was a really good player.
Nick, I don't think you want to guess who this was either.
For those that don't know, it was Luke.
Yes, correct. Correct. Adam's about, 8 years my junior. How old were you there when you achieved your first ATP ranking?
I was 18, so back end of 18, yeah. So a bit behind where this one sits at the beginning.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And that's where for the women, it's actually your 15th birth year. And these are some of the key sort of stats that you sort of look for, because you see again, this is world's best. So obviously we're highlighting some of the great Australian players that you can see here with sort of achieving those top end rankings. I mean, Kyrgios was 17 when he got his first ATP ranking, Leighton 16, Diminar was 16, and how they can then track on. Because Adam, you were talking about the percentages of if you're not sort of cracking through top 100 by 23, there's a lot of information out there in and around that.
Yeah, I think it's 1% for a male. If you're not top 100 by 23, you got 1% chance of then cracking it from there. And there's a couple Aussie that have done it, and so it is possible. And everyone is on their own journey. But as Luke sort of is saying, there's a lot of clues being left by some of the best in the world, and top 100 players obviously are that. So yeah, it's just trying to make sure that we're using these benchmarks to help guide us as much as we can.
Yeah. And it is a bit shock and awe. It's trying to sort of really show people, because I think for the girls here, again, I know again some of our retired players with Mollick, Stoes, and Rabati, but this data it's actually consistent. So they're getting their first ATP rank at 15 and tracking again for top 100 quite quickly. And it's a global thing. It's not just Australia. You can see there with Ash Barty, obviously she had a sabbatical away from tennis through that, but she's still meeting those benchmarks. Because again, that's the pro level. But what we see here as well is it actually links back to ITF as well. And again, as Adam mentioned, there's a lot of different pathways, but this is typically the well-worn path. And for the boys, you can see obviously how they basically track. They're generally getting they are getting their ITF junior ranking. They're getting on the board in their 14th birth year, and you can see how they can make that transition quite quickly. Because all these ranking benchmarks, because what they do know, again, for the women, for their young girls, they're basically getting their ITF junior ranking at 13, because what it then does, it just creates so many more opportunities for exposure, for tours, for trips. And that's how you can quickly see how you can progress or alternatively stagnate, because with these different ranking criterias, and again, happy to share this data if anyone's interested, as you can see here is when you actually meet 5+ ranking benchmarks, the transition rate for the girls, again, I'll say that again, if you are meeting 5 of those ranking benchmarks, conversion rate to being a top 100 female player is 99%. Which is, again, what they sort of look at the investment for the men. When you reach 5+ ranking benchmarks, the conversion rate is 84%. That's pretty telling numbers there. I don't know, Nick, if you've seen this data before, but again, it says so much. But and again, as Adam mentioned there too as well, if you meet none of those benchmarks, the chance of success to crack the top 100 is 1%. So I think it sort of shows the importance of actually trying to get on the path quite early. Of that, again, if we look at those people that 1% that have made it, you've got Astra Sharma, Chris O'Connell, Alex Vukic, which might be some familiar names for some of us.
Yeah, obviously for us, we know Alex really well. He was part of Luke's programs when he was at high school, and I was sort of playing at that time as well, and he was training with us as part of that sort of program, which was really good. Probably exposure for him at that time. But then, he wasn't ready at 18 to go down that professional route, but he was able to get into a really high level college, and that's the route he went, and hence why he was a little bit later with sort of meeting some of these benchmarks because of college. But he needed that time, I would say, and I think if you asked him, it'd be the same answer. That really steadied him, prepared him really well to actually make the transition to a really high level. I think when it came time when he finished his college degree. So it's not just a one size fits all. There's different sort of routes to get there, but I think Alex was a really good example of that, and Chris too. He had a different route to what most others would have because of injury. So he didn't give up on that dream. He still kept fighting and found a way to sort of manage his body a lot better. And once he got time on the court, he actually got the results that he probably could actually do. So, which is a really good actually testament to staying in the game.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it also too highlights the importance of that college pathway, where it does. I mean, I know both Adam and I, we both played professionally for quite a long time and didn't take that. And I know for me, in retrospect, if I had that opportunity over again, maybe I would have made a different decision and looked to go down it to have those extra 3 or 4 years. But yeah, we're just seeing how many players are looking at college as a way to really get it. Because I think some of the data I saw, that was over 700 players on the boys' side that were above a 12 UTR playing college tennis. They showed you the depth, and you're seeing guys like Ben Shelton, how quickly they transition. But it just, again, there's not one right way, but it just shows you where obviously a lot of the success comes from.
Yeah. And Astra too went to college, so yeah, forgot to mention that.
Yeah, exactly. She was at Virginia, so some really good information there. Now, I think too, a bit of shock and awe there. I think to sort of look at the top end, I think also to understanding what we're up against, because this is where we can come back and look at the sort of national data. And this is from the average UTRs at our grass court, hard court, and clay court nationals. And you can see here, obviously, there's data for everyone to sort of see there with the average. And this is the average from quarterfinals. Sorry, I should say. The average of our quarterfinalists on. And I think if you compare the hard courts to the number one ranked in the world, you can see we're actually, again, 0.84 behind where they are on the boys' side. On the girls' side, again, our average quarterfinalists is at 7.06. But again, number one is in the world is 8.26. So you can start seeing we are a little bit behind on the average. Again, it's the quarters, not against the best. But I think what jumps out at me here, guys, is how quickly that changes from 12 to 14s. You can see the jump that you see, and I know I was quite fortunate being on some of Tennis Australia's recent tours. Last year to Europe, went through France, Spain, Italy. The year before through Florida, and I know with did a webinar with Ryan. He asked me what was the first thing that jumped out at me, and off the cuff, my response was just the sheer amount of kids that have dedicated themselves to tennis, where tennis was the center of their lives and everything else worked around them. It was actually quite remarkable to see how many people were doing what they loved and they were really passionate about it, because I think you start seeing there, it's again, it's a good insight, because I know what Nick's going to sort of come back and talk to is the roads to nationals and how we can get there. But it just gives you a bit of insight on the level of what we need to aspire to be.
Yeah, I think it's just really good to know what the best is. That way we can try and get there and navigate that road. So
yeah. And again, for comparable data as well, as you look at the average top 10 in the world for the boys, it's a 13.38. Is the top 10 average, in the girls, it's an 11.38. So we can start to see really where sort of, I guess, the rubber hits the road, and a lot of these kids start really taking off and doing some amazing things. But yeah, I think it's a good place to start. But guys, I can't see if there's any questions. Obviously, I'm doing PowerPoint, so if there is anything, please feel free to fire out if you feel like it's relevant. But I think to sort of come back to it, we sort of touched on it before, Nick, in and around the junior pathway is really, and I'll be fully transparent. I guess for me as a coach, I head up our full-timers that are already sort of national level. I'm more so learning more about this pathway as a father of a 9-year-old, 11-year-old youngsters who are loving their tennis journey. But I'll admit it too. I've actually been a bit confused. So I can really see how for a lot of our first-time parents, how challenging it can be. But Nick, I think for you, knowing what you've been able to do and the culture that you're creating and really sort of converting, I guess, some of the kids that really started as playing once or twice a week to really getting on the pathway. I mean, what do you often see as being those really sort of the tricky starting points?
Yeah, look, thanks, Luke. I think for me, I see a lot of focus and emphasis on the actual training, how much you're training, where you're training, who your coach is, who you're playing with. But I see very little focus, or I have seen very little focus on the actual competitive side of things. So I think this is where a lot of the confusion is. A lot of players, parents are not sure where to start, as you pointed to, when they're sort of 9, 10, starting to love their tennis. You know, where do they start? Are they playing the Sunday morning comps? Are they playing the UTR match play events? Whereas what I'm trying to do is steer them towards what we call the Australian Junior Tour. It's made up of about 250 or so events, nationally, regional and metro, and players are competing for what we call ranking points, and that goes towards the end of year finals, or what used to be called the Masters. So my role here has been really to steer those players and put a big focus on the, I guess, the junior tour. And then once they hit 14, ideally we'd like them to get them to transition to ITF juniors and potentially even the European tour and beyond.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, Adam, you sort of deal with a lot of kids in this space as well. I'm pretty sure it's the same on your side as well with that.
Yeah, definitely. I guess we've spoken about it a little bit before, but from a younger age, around 9, I'm trying to get my players that are ready. They're sort of gone beyond what their club little tournaments may be, and some more Saturday morning comps, and they're looking for something bigger and better. And we're trying to get them to more. They're looking at the JDS side of things, but they're also, I think, dabbling in the JT 12 and under, sort of 125s. As well. By 10, hopefully they're starting to be better in their age group, under 10s, dominating a lot of that, still playing a lot more JTs in 12 and unders, maybe having a little bit more success, still not a lot. Under 11s, when they turn 11, then having a lot more success, making semis, maybe winning the odd smaller event, maybe gaining some national sort of qualifying and maybe getting through nationals and playing that for the first time and some experience there. And hopefully really by 12 and under, they're starting to dominate their age group. So we kind of have this sort of vision from around 9. It sort of starts the path a little bit more and starts navigating that a little bit further. And then hopefully can sort of see how they're going with their success. But yeah, hopefully by 12, they're actually dictating a lot of their tournaments that they're playing at their age group, and they're having success there, and they're starting to look to venture to higher and maybe higher age groups potentially every now and then too. But yeah, that's sort of the starting path, how I sort of envision it for my kids coming through my programs at that age. But I know Nick knows a lot more about the events themselves and sort of where to sort of navigate and what are the best sort of tournaments to sort of go to obviously reach maybe a Masters or year-end finals as well. So I might let him sort of talk about that sort of path a little bit more.
I think if I can jump in, Adam, I think, Nick, obviously before you sort of talk more about that end of the 8 race sort of system, do you have any insights into how many matches you want to see the kids play per year? Probably the younger sort of bands of what we see from maybe 8 to 10-year-olds in that sort of green ball space.
Yeah, I think that look, there's no one size fits all here. It depends on the player, and it depends on there's a lot of factors. But I'll pull up an example. We've got a 9-year-old girl, so 2014 birth year. 2023, she played 153 matches. That was a mixture of JTs, JDS, RMS events. But her win-loss ratio, and I think this is key, was 65 wins to 35 losses, which I think is quite well balanced. So we didn't see any signs of burnout last year, physical, mental, or anything else. She's still loving her tennis. So I think the more the better generally, but we've got to keep that balance. So if they start losing, significantly more than they're winning, then it might be time to reevaluate and adjust that match schedule. But yeah, she's 150 matches last year, and we're aiming to do something similar this year as well, moving forward.
Yeah, I think definitely good information. Because I know you answered my next question there was really around the win-loss sort of ratio, because there is a lot of information there. I know Fiends, you'll know as well, the ITF sort of guidelines being around that 2-to-1 win-loss record. But something we do see a lot of kids wanting to play up as well. Play up as in play up age groups rather than mucking around. But it's I think it's one of the key points in how you can know to sort of seek that higher level. Because I think linking back to that, the kids that are playing professionally, typically the ones that are meeting those benchmarks, they're generally dominating 2 age groups up. So 2 years ahead, they're actually top of the tree and really dominating. So I think that's where, again, if the kids get that experience level early, they've obviously got that healthy balance. Because I think my take on it as well, guys, is as Nick mentioned, everyone has a different appetite. And I think there as well, it's not necessarily about saying, hey, look, this is what you've got to play. You've got to play X amount of hours. It's about finding whatever that individual's appetite is for training, for competition, and how we can nurture that as parents and coaches. I think is really important, but just giving them a little bit less and knowing when to pull back so you get that balance. Because it is a key thing, because we are talking about trying to really strive for the highest level, do well on an international level. And that burnout factor is actually something that we definitely want to do our best to manage. But yeah, I think definitely really good on that. But I think sort of, Nick, looking to you, sort of talking about the recent changes, because that's where these changes with the end of year race is really end of year finals has changed quite quickly. I think it's only in the last week that the TA sort of changed that space, from what I know.
Yeah, that's right, Luke. Big changes. I just picked this up over the weekend. So the end of year, just to take a step back, one of the big goals for these juniors is to play enough of these events. So in the past, they would get significant ranking points and then be admitted to what we call, or what used to be called, the end of year Masters or December Showdown in Melbourne, where the best junior players would come together and play off in December for 12s, 14s, 16s and 18s. Last year, 2023, there was a big emphasis, or an incentive, I should say, to accumulate as many points as you could. They would give 24 direct entries to the Masters based solely on points. They would then take 8. This is for 12s and 14s. So then take 8 via direct UTR. That table is now turned. So there's no longer an emphasis on points. They have cut. Got the facts here. They have cut 12s and 14s main draw down from 32 to 16. They're taking 10 players based on UTR solely. And then the remaining 24 highest points players now need to play off and qualify. And there are only 6 qualifying spots available. So this is a dramatic change. It's a big change, and it changes the landscape completely. So that is a major one. I think it came in late last week or over the weekend, and it's in effect immediately for this year.
Yeah, and I think, I was there. We had 9 players competing in the end of year Masters last year, and I think that was one of the things that we did see is there were a lot of lopsided matches. What they're trying to do is basically reward the players that have essentially got the runs on the board and have that high UTR. And I think one thing we haven't talked about, we've mentioned UTR quite a lot, is what I really like about UTR, and you guys can give me your perspective as well, is you can, if you're looking at the idea of a decimal point changing by 0.02, or I think you're in the wrong sort of pathway, you should be looking at becoming a broker. It's really about knowing where you are in the world of tennis. And that's what we saw there with the guidelines. You can actually get a really good look of it. And I think the key thing for me is knowing where you are in the world of tennis is really important, and understanding it's not the be all and end all. I can tell you, for a lot of our players, when they graduate and they go over to the States, they find their UTR jumps up by one whole level, because there's again, when they go to the States, whether we're not valued or it's inflated over there, it's just one of the things that it is. But it's just where you can actually really see. Again, it's generally quite fair. No one ever really argues with it. There might be sort of, if there's no cross pollination, might be sort of smaller sections where it might not be as accurate as it could be. But it's a really, no one's ever argued with it. But I think that's where, for me, it's not about chasing a rating. It's, well, hey, what do we need to do to chase development so the rating naturally improves? I think it's as simple as that. I think I hear so much noise about it. I generally try to shut those conversations down. But I just like the fact that we can create match play with meaning. You know where you are in the world of sport, in the world. It's really, really simple.
Yeah, I think UTR for me is just a benchmarking sort of tool, but it shouldn't be something that you'd be worried about too much. Again, like you said, development is the key thing. If you're good enough, it will follow that, because you'll have success. And so the other thing as well is that I tend to see is that people don't want to play because their UTR will go down, whereas we know playing matches is a key part of the development. So when you take that away from them because you're worried about UTR, then you're actually losing that opportunity to keep getting better. So, you know, those players that I've seen that have the most success, they're just not worried about it. It's background sort of noise, the UTR, and like we've sort of seen with some meetings that we've had recently with TA is once you hit 13 and you get ITF points, you know, UTR, it has less meaning now for them because now it's all about ITF points. That's how you get into these tournaments. So yes, it's important to some degree to sort of give an understanding, but it's not the be all or end all. But I think, you know, I'll just keep pushing the idea of playing more matches, and if you're good enough, it will get there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where you can see, like, the UTR is just a reflection of your level. And I know, again, for those that don't know Adam, I know he played badge for us and he jumped on and played, and his UTR went from nothing to a 13.8, which might have been
pretty accurate after 3 matches, I think.
Yeah, which might have been slightly inflated, but I think it then sort of came down to a mid-12 sort of UTR. But it's just a pure reflection of Adam's a really good player. Even defying his age there by being able to sort of, I guess, dust up a lot of the younger guys that were out there, but just shows really quickly who's good. And I think that's where, even if you're at the starting point, because I can see some questions coming through already. And again, my son is 9, he's a 2.3 UTR. Like, his starting point is playing local JDSs. He plays UTRs on the weekends, and I don't view that as, hey, he's got to move his rating. It's just a really simple thing. How does he gain more experience so he becomes a better player? And naturally, through those competitive opportunities, his UTR is going to go up. And it's just, it can be as simple as that. And that's where, again, to get into those 125s, the 250s, the 500s, with the TA events, you just have to start. But there's lots of opportunities, especially for those that live in Sydney, in and around it, where you can play almost every weekend. I know there's even weekday events where you can get out there and compete. But yeah, it's something that is quite sort of straightforward and simple if you have the right sort of approach to it, I think.
Yeah.
But
can I quickly just mention the sort of the layout of the tournaments in terms of like the JTs? I know it's something that Nick put together with obviously JDS being sort of the first thing, then RMS, and then you're stepping into JTs, the 125s, goes to 250s, 500s, which are usually put just around sort of national times as a lead into nationals, and then you've got your nationals, which are 1,000 events. I guess when to play what a little bit, and so, you know, 125s is like the starting tool of JTs. So it's your sort of verse venturing into that. And then I guess it's a bit like, you know, the rest of the tours, that what they try to do is make it similar to ATP and WTA Tour. As you get better, more better players are playing, so it might be harder to get into these events, and sometimes draw sizes will change as well. And so basically, you just have to be mindful again of which events that your child is playing to whether they can get in or not. So I usually have a question around if I've got a player of mine could play a 125 or a 250, which one should they play? I always go for initially the one that they can win. So I'm like, go and play the one that you can win. If you're going to be the top couple of seeds, play that first. Okay. Once you start having success there, then I'm like, okay, well, now let's go to the 250. Okay. So I'm always an advocate for winning and building confidence in players. And then if they are then having that success, then I'm like, okay, yeah, go for it. Next time there's an opportunity, we'll play the higher one. You know, and then equally, if you're starting to do really well in these events, you're doing really well at nationals, maybe then obviously they're playing the next age group up. If they're 12s, they should be playing 14s in some of these events if they're doing well in national events already. So I think it's just picking the time of when to play up that next level, but don't do it if you're not having success in that level before. So if you're playing 250s, you might want to go and double in 500s. That's okay, but it may not be the be all or end all, going into that particular event. So just be mindful of that, because we're talking a lot around that sort of that win ratio still being super important with that development as well. And confidence is part of that process.
Yeah, it's interesting you finished off with it, because Fiends obviously just reminded me of one of our youngsters last year. We've sort of started to have people transitioning onto the ITF circuit, and it helps that his father's a former player himself that went down the college pathway, and we've had a lot of those conversations around the investment. And some of his teammates were heading off to play ITFs where their sort of level was sort of mid-9 UTRs, and we know at ITF level how typically what level you need to be successful. And he decided to stay and play the J500, which he won. Playing up an age group. Again, quite a good player. And that led into the nationals, the hardcourt nationals, where I don't think he'd ever won a round at nationals before, and ended up making finals at nationals. Purely on that concept of, again, competing is about learning how to win. It's as simple as that. It's the biggest skill I would see that most people underestimate, is that's the key to problem solve. Figuring out who's down the other end. Obviously, not so much worrying about yourself, more so how do I actually use a strategy to actually break my opponent down. And I saw with this youngster how he used that to basically get the experience, get the confidence, and then go out there and do well on a national level. And we saw in a really short space of time how his trajectory changed. And again, we're talking J500s and national levels. But Nick, you touched on one of your students that played. This young fella played 190 matches last year. So you actually start seeing, when we talk about 190 matches, it's not necessarily just tournament matches. It's playing badge doubles, it was playing comp, it was every opportunity to compete. He was out there competing and learning how to do better. And that's what we sort of really want people to understand. There are so many different pathways to navigate, but if you can come back to just focus on you becoming the best player and improving every day, things can actually turn around and change very, very quickly. So
yeah, and I think that's where like utilizing UTR events is like a super important part of that as well. Like as we know, there's abundance of UTR events these days. So it's how do you utilize them to get quality matches, and hopefully, matches at a similar level. That's where most benefit will be, when there's something competitive, where you've got to work out and problem solve and be a bit more resilient. So it's using those matches to sort of top up the bank of your development all the time, and then obviously have your key tournaments that you're sort of striving for. Usually the bigger events, the nationals or whatever it is, that's the big event for your child at that time. So I think UTR events have an importance, but for that play through sort of cycle, it's not the be all or end all for winning those matches, but obviously they want to have success, but it's understanding what the purpose is for them.
Definitely. And I think, for me, selfishly, like with what we're at with our full-time players at the academy out at Olympic Park, we really want to see more kids dominating on an international level, because the bulk of the kids are already competing at nationals, and that's one thing that we're really sort of keen to see, is how you can start understanding how to then transition to that next level, which obviously goes from local to national to ITFs, and I think again we've covered some of those topics, but I think you can come back to the age restrictions there, but when we sort of transition to the ITF level events. And again, for those that don't know the acronyms, I know we're talking about different things, JTs and all these different UTRs. The ITF are the International Tennis Federation. They govern the Grand Slams, Davis Cup, Fed Cup, and what it is, it's a junior pathway leading to junior Grand Slams. I know, obviously, Adam, you did this a lot. I think final of junior Wimbledon doubles as a youngster, went through it, top 20. We really looked at this, but there's different categories here of events, and it starts the entry point. And again, coming back to the idea of playing internationally, if we're going to meet those benchmarks, which for the girls is achieving an ITF ranking by 13, typically we sort of see those kids are already tracking that sort of 7.5 plus. It's for the girls 7.5 plus UTR by the age of 12. We start seeing them there, but that's where they then transition into the 13s. So we see a good starting point. For the boys, it's about a 9 plus UTR, starting out in that J30, J60 sort of range. But again, even on just as we speak, we had 5 players down here at the J100 in Canberra, and you got 2 of our players are through to the second round. They're both sort of 10.5 plus. There's and again, sorry to backtrack here. To me, there's 3 levels. There's your entry level, where you're trying to get a ranking. There's your consolidation level, where you're sort of between that J100, J300. And then there's the elite, which is really what we saw in that very original document there, which is your J500, which leads to your junior Grand Slams. And that's where you start seeing those ranking benchmarks to really ensure that you actually can compete and do well at those levels. Because I think, again, with the ITF rankings, it's just your best 6 tournaments. So we see some kids that are basically chasing the entire year playing J30s, and some of the questions I ask them, they might not be able to get past the second round. I just simply say, what's 5 times 6? That's going to be their bulk of points, and you're only earning 30 points. It's actually not going to get to that next level. So we really sort of, again, try to get them to understand that you need to chase development so you can actually break through and have those wins against those better players. But guys, anything for you to add on that side of thing?
The only thing I would mention would be, yeah, like when you can start playing. You might have said it before, but for it's usually at 13 you can start to delve into these events, and you have a maximum of 10 events that you can play anyway. So they actually cap the amount of events that you can play, just because they don't want, I think that burnout factor as well. I think it's happened in numerous cases before, when a while ago now. So but yeah, by 14 it's 14 events, 15, 16 events, and then by 16 it's 25, and then it's unlimited from then on. So yeah, they're really trying, I guess, keep a lid on how many events you can play. And if you're doing really well, actually, if you become top 20 during those events that you've played, say you're 14, you played your 14 events, you're top 20, then they'll allow you another 4 events. They're not trying to stop you if you're doing really, really well. They'll give you extra events to play, maybe some of the big events. So but you'll see, again, some of the elite players that are doing really well, they'll transition through that pathway, have a lot of success, and then they're transitioning into WTA, likely at a younger age, like some of the great players that we're already seeing.
Yeah, and Adam, I think I've probably already touched on it there by giving the sort of the UTR guidelines and when to start. Is you mentioned that 13th birthday is an ideal time to start.
Yeah.
What do you know about the? Because again, the ITFs, if you do, it's obviously you start traveling all over Australia and internationally, so it does become quite costly, not just from the financial cost, but also to generally they're during the school term, so you start seeing how you're missing out on those again, all the things that a normal kid would have. But if you had a 13-year-old that was a 6.5 UTR on the boys' side, what would you be saying to them?
Yeah, I wouldn't be pushing it on them at this point. Then, like, they're not at that stage where they're going to get real benefit to go there. So the likelihood of them having success isn't high. So I wouldn't be asking parents to fork out a lot of money for maybe an experience that isn't going to be so good. So I'll be all about, just play locally, get that UTR higher, work on themselves, get that better, and then hopefully from there they get to a point where they can go to an event and not just participate, but actually try and have success as well. So yes, there's a lot to be said for gaining experience, but you want to make sure there's also good experience within that too. So yeah, I think that's how I'd go about it.
Yeah, and that's what I sort of want to just make sure that we're not sending out any mixed messages, because we currently in the academy have 2 kids that are both number 1 in the country, and one of them a 13-year-old boy. He is playing the ITF. He started that pathway. He's got restricted events, but he is 13 and a 9.7 UTR. So that's the level. One of our other girls is in her 13th birth year. She's pushing an 8 UTR. Again, that's why they'll get opportunities, because even at that level, they probably won't get in. That's where they get generally wild cards from Tennis Australia to get in. So even some of our seniors who are sort of 17th, 18th birth year, they're 10 plus UTRs because they didn't meet the sort of the levels early. That's a bit of a lottery to get in. So it's not necessarily saying, hey, look, once you reach this mark. What I would say is hopefully you've got a really good coach that can actually help, obviously, with this education piece, because it does get quite sort of a little bit sort of trickier in that sense.
Yeah.
But I think too, like sort of talking about how we shape from JDS, and again talking about that's the junior development series, which is really good for your under 10s, leading to your RMS, again the regional metro series that lead to those JTs, the junior tournaments. It sort of goes all the way up, and again, just want to be really clear here into pro events, what we sort of see from the UTR benchmark. And again, I think this is from the 2022 Australian Open qualies. So the Australian Open qualies, the average UTR on the men's was a 14.25. The average UTR on the women's was an 11.9. I think this is where I've often asked some of my students what their goal is when they do get carried away by the UTR, whether, hey, it's a 9.2 or a 9.4. I always ask them, what's the goal? when they say it's play professionally, so well, 9 doesn't really cut it anyway. Because these benchmarks here are sort of top 250 in the world. That's the level that we're trying to aspire to do, to get to. But I think before we throw it open to questions, I think probably the last thing I'd sort of say is, for me, obviously the process will really determine the outcomes. And what I wanted to share with you as well is this is the schedule of one of our kids who's, again, 12 years of age and #1 in the country. This is what their week looks like. They do have the aspiration to become obviously a tennis professional, and they're part of our full-time program where it's got a school that works around the tennis. And you can see there how that actually looks, the dedication, commitment required. And I think too, for us, one of the things that we've discussed internally is that we want to be really clear and say, hey, this is what we see from a professional perspective. I hope for some, because and we've seen it with some, when they've actually understood what it's about, some people have said, hey, we don't want this. That's actually not for me. I'm not dedicated enough. I'm not committed enough. And to me, that's okay. What they've then started to do is look at different pathways, and whether it's actually college at a lower level, what they basically had the expectations for. What I've typically seen is they've aligned their expectations with the work they're putting in, and they actually really enjoyed their tennis. But again, this is where you can see here with this young player, they have over 20 hours a week on court, and the jury's out. I'll be really open and honest. Whether or not that volume is really important. For me at the younger age, it's really about giving yourself the best foundation, having great technique. You don't make players at 11, 12, 13 that don't become professional players, but I tell you, you can break them. If you don't have the right foundation, if you don't have the right technique, if you don't have the right mindset, that's where you can see you're setting some pretty permanent habits that can be quite difficult to undo if you have to rebuild down the track. But you can see here the level, again, not always getting 20 hours if they're sore or stiff. There's generally huge chunks of time dedicated towards the tennis, and a lot of them too are technical time. Obviously, some of it's match play, point play, practice sets, but there's a lot of time that's sort of scheduled in. So I think it's just over 20 hours from tennis, and I think it's about around 10 hours of physical development too that's built into their week. But Nick, I know a lot of your students are doing something similar that are maybe a little bit earlier on the pathway, so probably not as heavy, but that is, again, what we're seeing with kids that are really, again, committed to the cause.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in there as well. This is a sort of doc that I sort of share with my kids and try to get them to fill out. And I know Nick has it with a bunch of his players too. So just to try and get an overview of actually what they're doing. Like for me, I coach a bunch of kids privately. They do some squads with us. They do some stuff externally as well. So just to try and get an oversight of actually what they're doing, what fitness elements they're doing, and actually, is this actually aligning with what they're trying to say their goals are and their aspirations? And if it isn't, I'll be open about, okay, well, this needs more. You need more of this physical side of things. Maybe there's got to be some mental components for some students. Okay, maybe there's got to be more recovery and more rest. And so it's really about trying to get an understanding of what their age is, what their goal is. Okay, what are they putting towards? And as you can see, it's utilizing the whole day. You know, they have school, that takes up a big part of it. So it's utilizing as much as they can outside of that school time. Someone like Luke's student here is obviously lucky they got this school time available as well, but a lot of people may not have that. So it's really important that you're utilizing morning times, obviously afternoon, evening times, and weekends as best you can. So I think it's really trying to understand the student, okay, and their habits, but also the goals. There's no shortcuts, unfortunately, to getting really good.
Yeah, and no secrets either. That was really, I think that's one of the key things. That's what we're trying to do. Is I've never seen anyone achieve a really high level without actually really committing themselves and putting in a ton of work when it comes to their tennis.
Yeah.
But I think, Nick, I don't know if you have any sort of final points. And I guess, sorry, for clarity as well, that young player who's #1 in the country is actually ranked just inside the top 50 in the world. So you can see they're number 48 currently in the world. And I'm sure there's kids that are missing sort of some of the tracking from countries that don't necessarily use UTR, but you can really see where we're at. And that's what we're trying to really do, is educate. How do we get, and my goal is quite simple. How do we get more youngsters really committing? And again, families being aware at an earlier age. So you can actually be basically prepared and ready to go and move up the pathway. And if you do have those aspirations to be able to achieve them.
Yeah.
But again, guys, I think we're doing pretty well for time here. I am going to stop sharing my screen, but if we do have any more questions here, this is so I can see the screen. But
I couldn't see any questions, Luke. I'm not sure if I was looking in the right spot.
yeah, well, I think it's always a good thing when you do, if you can obviously cover off a lot of information like that to really to be clear.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, if
Nick,
anyone has any questions around, obviously anything to do with maybe more juniors or particular pathways, obviously we're open to anything.
So even Nick, I guess a question I'd have for you, because I mean, with some of our sort of red orange green sort of kids, I know we run our club champs to try to get sort of start building the love for competition. How much are you encouraging your young sort of again transitional players with sort of moving from orange to green? How much are you encouraging them to start playing per week versus competing? I think that's one of the big things. I look at soccer. I mean, soccer. Again, my kids played soccer. They played basically one training per week, and straight away they're into competing. And that's one of the things there as well, where I see a lot of kids at the reverse. And I know my coach basically said to me is tennis has almost become like violin for some people. They get a lesson and they never play. How often would you try to encourage that balance between training and competing in that under 10 sort of space?
Yeah, I think again it's quite individual. But look, the earlier they can start competing, I think generally the better. But again, with that super young age, you do need to watch out for certain signs. Again, the win-loss ratio comes in mentally. How are they? How are they coping with losses? How are they performing? What are their results like? Are they enjoying competing? So there's a number of factors, but I think the only way to find out is to actually get them to start. And that's where the RMS JDS events come in. That's why they're so good. A lot of even under 8s in JDS, they can play orange ball, round robin format, plenty of matches, singles and doubles. And it's really sort of good stepping stone to the 1-2-5s. So some kids will be super keen, they'll love it. Other kids will find it quite stressful, and that's when you've got to adjust. So
yeah, definitely good insight. Beans, I don't know. I can see a question here. I don't know if you remember the answer to this one. I definitely know it. Can 18-year-olds, so turning 19 in their 19th birthday, play junior ITF slams? Because obviously that's one of the things that we have in Australia is, and again, Nick, I know it's something you're big with. There is a massive advantage if you're born early on in the year. So what Tennis Australia has done is had a birth month system where you can play up until the month of when you change up or you age up. Fiends, do you know the answer to that one there?
That answer is a no. You cannot play if you're turning 19. Yeah. So it's as of the year that you are. So you must be 18 that year, not turning 19.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So all 05s can no longer play. So what they basically have every year, you'll see at ITF level, and that's part of that concept of having an entry level, consolidation level, then the elite. They basically call it the drop, where every year, person who actually is moving into that next year. So this year, December 31st, what you'll have is the rankings will literally every 06 will drop off the ranking. So all the 07s will automatically jump up. That's where you see the cutoff for the tournaments in January. It's quite interesting to see the slams. You might see players that are sort of 7, 8, 9, 10 in the world being the top because basically the kids that were the year before in those high rankings, they've all aged out. So that's where it's not until you get that drop happening. So, but definitely a good question because I think that's where, again, we're really trying to steer more players down that path. And it starts very, very young. So great question there.
Just to elaborate, I think Nick knows this better than me though. If you were trying to get to nationals or at the year end, if you're 12 but you're turning 13, say in September, but you want to get the year end nationals in 14s, they take, is it the top 3? Is that right, of your 12s as well as 14 and under?
Yeah. So it's a total of, they take the top 8 results.
Yeah.
Out of those top 8, 3 can be out of age.
Okay.
So let's say you're 13, or let's say you're under 14, you're going to under 14s or aiming to play under 14s Masters or end of year finals this year, but you're still qualifying to play some under 12s for calendar month. And if you do really well in those under 12s, they'll count 3 out of those 8, both singles and doubles.
Gotcha.
We've got a girl who's born on December 31st here, Adam.
Yeah.
So it's not the ideal. We've also got players who were born, January 1st, January 2nd. But to sort of, I guess, counterbalance that, TA have allowed 3 out of age results to count to the end of year points.
Yeah, fair enough.
Good insight. I guess probably answer this one last question that we do have here as well is, and I think I know what you guys are going to say for this. For a boy of 12 years old, what kind of junior matches would you recommend? So it is quite an open question there, which I think is quite hard to answer. But Nick, I'll probably throw that to you again.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how much he's played. But I would always start, if there's not much experience there, I'd always start with RMS or JDS events. You can play 12s and 14s in those. And if he has some success there, I'd go straight to the 125s. But if he's already playing, 125s and having good success, getting deep into the main draw, you can move him up to sort of 250s in the holidays. But again, during the term, as Adam touched on before, the UTR match play events are key as well. They play a big part. But yeah, RMS and JDS events are always, for me, the starting point.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah, definitely good advice. And I think one thing, we talk about UTRs, I know one thing that I'm really a fan of, try to encourage all my students to do is actually going back and just playing practice sets, to get on the phone. I mean, it doesn't always have to be UTR based. And I know that is one of the things that some of our students struggle with is we might have key development priorities that they're trying to address and work on. And when they know that there's a UTR on the line, which might affect their entries into tournaments and sometimes tours and different things that actually can be quite challenging. I definitely sort of recommend trying to play as many practice sets throughout the week. And the young sort of student that I showed you there, we've actually converted one of their technical sessions into set play. Because again, it's that idea of what we're trying to work towards is really how to construct sets, how to actually figure out how we can focus for long periods of time. And the only way to really do that is to actually get out there and compete. So it doesn't always have to be UTR based. It can be any ways, and sometimes whether you play your friend for a drink or whatever it may be, there's definitely lots of different ways to just get out there and practice.
Yeah, it used to be a big part of my schedule growing up. I grew up on the Central Coast, so didn't have lots of access all the time to many players, but I was fortunate to have a couple of good players around my age. And yeah, at least twice a week, one of our parents would be picking us up and dropping us at the courts for 3 hours and then picking us back up again. And all we did was compete. We just competed nonstop. And sometimes we got 4 of us down there and would switch and compete and switch who we were playing against. And yeah, I look back at that and think that was actually a really important aspect of my development, as well as it was fun. I didn't always have a coach in the court, and it was up to us to actually sort of drive that. But we all hated losing, and so that was a big driver because there was usually things online that we played for. So and that was from a pretty young age. I was probably doing that from 13, through to 16. So with those same sort of guys. So it was a big part of my development within that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting here. I can see a comment here where the loser's dad pays for the court hire. So there's a way to really get your kids fired up about it. Because I think it's definitely a fun way to look at it. Because I know for our full-timers, they always talk about the donuts at the tuck shop. Not that I really sort of encourage them to have it, but they have the donut classic where they'll play their practice match and whoever wins has to buy the other one a donut at lunch the next day. So there's lots of different ways to do it to actually make it fun. So it's not necessarily about the pressure of the UTR moving, which I think is a really, really key thing.
100%.
Luke, I've just seen a good question here from Mike Wallace regarding regional tennis and this new end of year final system. I think that might be a good one for you to answer, because what I can see happening or potentially happening with this new system is that obviously there were a number of players chasing points in regional and small towns. Now that shift is focused to UTR, I think we'll see a lot more people chasing UTR, playing up age groups, I guess targeting those higher level events. So do you think there'll be much of an effect on regional tennis with this new system?
Well, I think it's already happened, in all honesty, but I mean, I'm probably showing my age here as well, where I was sort of, again, some background here. I'm the youngest of 10 children. And if it was the current system where in the past we had to travel as much as you could regionally, there's no way I'd be in the game. My first time leaving Sydney was at 16 to come to Canberra. My first time to go to Melbourne was at 17 to go and play the Australian Open. I think that's one of the things that you looked at, is because there wasn't this sort of this quest to go and chase a ranking. And Adam, you can probably remember it as well. When we were at White City, they basically posted the rankings, I think, 4 times a year. So there wasn't this whole sort of quest to improve UTR. It was just the joy of playing, and you just went down the path. It was so much, so enjoyable, because I think from what I saw, and again with my mentors and guys like Tony Roach was from Tuckata, the country used to move to the city. It really did. And again, I probably have a bit of a different take here. I've still never been to Bathurst. My kids are, so I'm going to make my first trip to Bathurst because my kids are playing this upcoming holidays, but I've never been to Bathurst. Not once ever as a player, not once as a coach. I've been there once to play rugby for my school against the Stannies, but that's the extent of my exposure at Bathurst. But yeah, maybe it is. But I do have some insights from the governance perspective on that system, because it's almost what I've seen going back 10 or so years. The metro used to be sort of held to ransom to have to travel to the country to play, and typically its parents had to take off Fridays and Mondays. There were all the challenges that we saw there, but I mean, as far as I know, the regional tennis is already suffering. So it's a really hard one that I don't have an answer for, but potentially is there. But I'm hoping still people, again, we're talking about this top 10. The top 10 players, there's quite a gap in the top 10 in the country with where they are on UTR. So what I'm hoping for is the ones that actually aren't quite at that level. I know I wasn't really as a kid. Hopefully they still have to have a look at, hey, how can we get these how can I play the 250s, the 500s? How can we still do that? But yeah, it's a really difficult one. And I know something Tennis Australia, Tennis as well, really grapples with. But it seems like it just keeps ebbing and flowing from countries coming to the city, now cities going to the country, and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's quite a tricky one.
Yeah, I don't think they've found the answer. I'm not sure if they will with this one or not. But I guess, like you said, there's obviously 2 different pathways that you can take. You can either be the best in the top 10, or you can be searching for points and get through that way as well. So I guess it's sort of knowing, you should know where you probably roughly are. I guess with all the now knowledge with UTR, like where you would sit within the country. So whether you're going to make that top 10 or not, and if not, what you got to do to get to the year-end finals, if that's the goal. So, I think there'll be 2 different pathways still, I think, that you could take. So hopefully it doesn't have too big effect, but there's already probably been a big effect already from what we're seeing.
Yeah. But I think last thing I'm going to say on that too, Fiends, because last year they had the race, and one of our young boys in the under-16s, I know he was looking at the race, and that was part of our plan throughout the year. And so he actually had a balance between playing up at ITFs and still playing the J250s and J500s. And he had a really good sort of balance throughout the year. Up until the 11th hour, he was leading the points race and not in on UTR. And I think at the very end, he pipped someone on the post just to sneak in on UTR. But even though he wasn't there, he ended up making finals of the 16s nationals. And part of that was the combination of just playing matches, continuing to get better, and then from there, good things happened. So I think that's when you come back to it, because I think again, probably to sort of bring it all together and sort of wrap it up is, obviously we know to play professionally. And again, it is a really high level. And as Adam, I know you hear me say this all the time, high performance, it's not inclusive, it's exclusive. It excludes people for lots of different reasons. And hopefully if that's something you're aware of, hey, I'm not quite prepared to sacrifices and make the commitment to go down that path, hopefully you can play for fun. Hopefully a lot more people sort of see, hey, look, college is a great option. Because I've seen a lot of high-level players that think, hey, I haven't made it as a professional. College is, because it was basically a secondary option, that then they weren't open to it. And they haven't gone down that path, and we've lost them to the sport. So hopefully it sort of gets you sort of aligned and understanding of what's required. And then again, if you're on that sort of the entry point, the things that you need to do, again, is still, to me, find a great club, find a great coach, passionate people that actually really want to help you, again, grow. And I know it's something Adam and I have sort of been talking about. What we're going to be looking to do in Voyager and some of our development programs is actually look to target and really help a lot of committed people down that path. That's something that we're going to be sort of looking to move towards in the coming terms. But I think it's a really important thing to sort of understand. There's lots of different pathways, but again, if you are really keen, you've got to get out, you've got to compete, you've got to train hard. Really, it is about proving yourself first. And then again, for me there, it's really, again, up to you. There's a lot of opportunity. So, guys, again, really thank you for tonight. Nick, thanks so much. And again, congrats on the great work you're doing there. Again, it's noticeable. I think every tournament that I've ever been, I've seen you there on weekends, in holidays. Mate, keep up the great work. It's doing such an amazing job as we saw. And again, congrats to your player that qualified on the weekend into 12s nationals. Fiends, again, obviously great. Great for you to bring up the fact that you got your first 18 point by beating me again, mate. I love that story.
Always share that one.
Yeah, it's a good one. But thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you around the court sometime soon. Good night.
Thanks, guys. Bye.